I think we're being recorded now, guys.
We're being recorded. Okay, so my name is Poonam Sandhu. I'm the head coach of the UBC Women's Field Hockey Program. I started my career playing field hockey with UBC. Was fortunate to win 5 national titles with UBC during my time, and became the first female field hockey athlete to win 5 national titles. During that time as well, I was fortunate enough to represent Canada. So I played with Canada from 2008 and I retired in 2014. And shortly after my retirement in 2014 and graduation in 2015, I started coaching with Robin Diabrio with the program as an assistant coach. And about 3 years later was offered the head coach position with the program, which is super exciting. A lot of crazy stuff in between. So if anybody has any questions, can definitely get into that later. And today I'm just currently working on my master's degree in sports psychology. So I'm following Katrina's path here, and I'm still waiting to finish that. So that's a little bit about myself.
Hi everyone, I'm Katrina. I'm a PhD student here at UBC studying sport and exercise psychology. So that's under the Department of Kinesiology. And I started my athletic career, if you can call it that, as a synchronized swimmer for a number of years, and got into a little bit of coaching, both locally and internationally. And now I've worked my way into focusing on mental performance. So the past couple of years, I've gotten to work with some athletes through Douglas College, Langara College, as well as most recently at UBC with Poonam and her athletes.
So I'll kick this off. So a little bit about us and our working relationship here. So in the beginning of our past season, I did reach out because I saw a gap and a void in our team regarding communication, confidence, and just issues around decision making. And so I reached out to the sports psychology department, and they paired us up with Katrina, and we were able to work together at the beginning of our season. Katrina, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just I guess working with the team involved both kind of group sessions and on the field stuff, as well as athletes could contact me one-on-one through counseling services, and we could do kind of mental performance specific sessions with individual athletes as well. So yeah. So I guess we'll get into it, as some of the topics today are, well, they're all centered around approaches for female athletes. I wanted to use this just as a reminder that sex differences, so male and female, are based on biological differences, which are important for many aspects of training, which I believe the rest of our speakers are going to get into. However, we wanted to also mention that gender is different because it is how the athlete identifies and perceives themselves, which may not necessarily be aligned with that same kind of 2-box category as biological sex. So from a psychology perspective, research tends to indicate that there's just as many differences within genders as there are between. So in other words, there's as much diversity amongst a group of women as there is diversity between men and women, typically. So given this, we're going to talk about tailoring your coaching approach to an athlete's individual needs, because this is really effective from a sports psychology perspective.
So for myself, I'm going to be talking about athlete-centered approach, and this is a big part of my personal coaching philosophy, and a lot of what I center my decisions and the type of environment that I like to create is around this approach. So you just listed a couple of key points here. So treating athletes as individuals. So just as Katrina mentioned, it's just as important to understand that there are differences between the genders as there much are within, so recognizing that each individual athlete has their differences is extremely important as a coach to try and blanket everybody as the same type of person, the same type of learner, just because they play the same sport or the same gender is not going to help you in the long run. And so what this approach really allows you to do is it allows you to tailor your approach to each athlete. Second is it helps you build on the athlete's assets. And so a lot of times as coaches, we do tend to focus on what the athlete doesn't bring and how we can fix that and how we can build that, the weaknesses. But it also, what this approach allows you to do is it allows you to understand the strengths that they bring to the table and really help to build on those assets, which I think is extremely important as well. Third, delivery and feedback. So understanding how, where, and when you can and should communicate with your athletes. When you have a better understanding of who your athletes are as individuals, you have a better understanding of where you can communicate with them, and how and what tone and what they receive and how they receive that feedback. So I just had a couple of examples. One example from my own personal experiences, player one might be a bit more reserved, a bit more relaxed as an athlete, has a bit more of a calm demeanor. I might not go to her and scream and shout and try to get her hype. She might respond to some sort of feedback that might be very straight to the point, reinforcing some of our key principles, and she might want that feedback to be done in a safe environment where it's just us one-on-one and there's not a whole lot of people around. And so it's understanding that is how she responds as an athlete, so that when she gets back out onto the field, she's playing, she's doing her best, and I haven't taken away from her confidence. Player two, however, could be way more aggressive, might have more of an up-tempo personality, and so they would want, quick reassurance, confirmation that their actions and thoughts are supported by myself. I give some quick feedback in there as well, but I'm supporting that message by a motivating, maybe high five, quick pat on the back, or maybe I'm shouting on the sideline, giving them that reassurance that they're doing well and we're here to support them. So delivery and feedback is something that is extremely important within this approach. And then finally, and I think this is one of the most important, is team culture is the athlete's culture. And so if we can create an environment that is supportive of our athletes, I think this is one of the most crucial things as a coach that we can do. Understanding that your athletes need to buy into the program. If you don't have that buy-in, then as a coach, you don't have their trust, and therefore the communication isn't going to be fluid. You want to ensure that whatever your team culture is, that becomes part of the athlete's identity. And then going forward, your communication is going to be just even more beneficial for yourself as a coach, but also for the athletes as well.
All right, so kind of building off of that athlete-centered approach is looking at motivation from a psychology perspective, because every athlete tends to fall somewhere along a line of this continuum here of motivation. So just briefly, at the far left, we've got amotivation, which is just a absence of motivation. And in the middle along the continuum is extrinsic motivation, where the athlete might be motivated by external sources, so things like punishment or rewards from the coach or approval from others. And at the far right of the scale, we have the most autonomous form of motivation, intrinsic motivation. So this is where the athlete is motivated through their own interest and their inherent enjoyment of the activity. So with each individual athlete, we want to understand where they might fall on this scale and help them achieve a more autonomous or self-determined form of motivation. So because although internal pressure and rewards might be motivating in the short term, external pressure or rewards might be more motivating in the short term, the internal motivation is considered to be the most effective for long-term and more self-sustained motivation. Moving on. So according to the research, the extent to which 3 basic psychological needs are fulfilled determine where the athlete falls along that motivation continuum. So when these 3 needs are supported, athletes are more likely to have that self-determined or intrinsic form of motivation. So we're going to look at what each of these needs are and what it would look like in training to support these needs. So the first being autonomy, which is the extent to which the athlete feels they have choice in their environment. So by allowing space for athlete autonomy in your training context, you can help support the athlete's motivation. And some basic ways of supporting this can be to offer athletes a choice or say in decision-making and planning, and to ask for their input when it's appropriate. So while older or adult athletes may have a greater capacity to be involved in some of those decision-making processes, I do want to emphasize that this is something that can be done with all ages. So with younger athletes, it might be simply offering a choice between 2 different drills when you had a skill that you plan to work on. Another example is that I worked with a group of 10-year-olds once and had them come up with expectations for each other as teammates at the beginning of the year, rather than it just coming from me and me telling them what to do. So they were actually really great with this and came up with things like expecting each other to come to practice on time, showing respect and being nice, so things like that. And with older athletes, you might give them a greater amount of autonomy, and I'm going to let Poonam talk about what that looked like with her athletes.
Yeah, so for us this season, as I mentioned before, we were working on decision-making and confidence. And communication was a bit of an issue as well after our youth sport season. So during our off-season time, we train in the local women's league and we play games against the Premier Division teams. So my assistant coach and I, we decided to silence ourselves on the sidelines and basically take a silent coach approach, as we called it. We did this because we wanted to increase the communication on the field from the athletes and allow them to work through some of the situations and problems that they were coming, they were faced with during our regular season. I was inspired to do this because I'd heard, rugby has these captains-led training sessions before major events and major competitions as a way for the team to connect. I also had seen that, the England women's head coach during the Rio 2016 Olympics was actually sitting on the sidelines, was sitting with the crowd as opposed to sitting on the sideline, and had their assistant coach leading the bench. And so, examples like this kind of got me thinking that, this might be it might be challenging in the beginning, but it might be a good approach to take to allow the team to come together and really work through those problems themselves and as a group, rather than always looking to the sideline and looking to the coaches to provide them with the appropriate feedback immediately. It was a struggle in the beginning, but it was a really great experience. In between, we were able to take feedback from the athletes and make adjustments where it was needed. And, happy to say that at the end, we made the finals, which we hadn't made in a few years. And so we made the finals in the Vancouver Women's Premier Division. Unfortunately, COVID-19 didn't let us compete in that game. But I think, it really went to show that taking steps like this, which are a bit scary in the beginning, really helped the team grow together and helped better their communication.
All right, so moving on to that second need is competence, which is the extent to which an athlete feels they're capable of being successful in their environment. So to support this, coaches can focus on the athlete's individual skill development and progression. So things like highlighting effort and some of those small changes week to week, and focusing on progress rather than only mistakes. So with the women's field hockey team, we use this approach to build their confidence a little bit as well. So focusing on things that they were able to do well. So we did this at the end of every practice and had them come together in a circle and share with the group what they felt they did well and what they accomplished that practice, because we felt, well, and from a psychology perspective, we tend to remember all of those mistakes that you've made. And so just bringing into the conversation some of those other assets and strengths was helpful for our athletes.
Yeah, and just from, coach's perspective, sometimes I think when we try to implement these exercises, we do tend to think that it requires maybe an hour session, maybe it requires an additional session on top of our already training schedule, or the set training schedule. And so this was an easy mesh. We already allocate 15 minutes at the end of our sessions for proper cool down technique and for stretching. And so it was really easy for us to implement this during our stretching circle where the girls were already together. And I think, again, it just kind of reinforced the confidence piece of saying out loud that I did something well was really great to hear from the athletes, because like Katrina said, athletes don't tend to focus on that. Their first focus goes towards the negative. And so it was really great to hear the athletes say it out loud in front of their peers and in front of their coaches as well, and have that confidence to do it.
All right, the final need, relatedness, which is the extent to which the athlete feels connected to others. So coaches can help support this by just getting to know your athlete as an individual and not just as an athlete, as well as things like creating a space for athletes to connect in a way that's meaningful. So this can be both in and out of training. And Poonam's got a great example of what this looked like with her team.
Yeah, so, for our team and our program, we've done this for years, but we have a bud system. And we implement this at the beginning of each year. And we have a senior or more senior athlete paired up with a junior rookie. And so this has always been great because it allows, the newer students who are going through that transition to feel supported right off the bat and feel like they have somebody to go to and rely on. We also use the bud system to check in throughout the year and also to be accountable for one another. So that's been really great. And another thing that we did this year was after our season, we were able to watch our Canadian women's team compete in the Olympic qualifying match, which they hadn't reached in, I believe, 28 years, which was insane and awesome. And so for a team bonding activity, we provided them with some money and they were able to go and buy, some pizza, grab some candy, and just have a really, just a lounging time. And they were able to put the game up on the TV and just hang out. And so this is something that we try to do throughout the year as well, to really get the girls to connect on a more personal level and off the field. And I think what it also does is, it kind of reinforces the fact that each individual's background, their cultural backgrounds, where they come from, what type of sporting background they come from, it all just kind of paints a picture of who they are as an individual. And it also reinforces the fact that it's really important to understand who they are on that personal level so that you can communicate and connect with them on the field. And so this is something that's, really important for us, this relatedness piece for our program, and it has been, but also for me personally as a coach and for my philosophy.
All right, and just kind of as a reminder, those three needs we talked about, autonomy, competence, and relatedness, supporting those needs can help your athletes to reach that more intrinsic form of motivation. Yeah.
Okay, well, that concludes the presentation. Thank you, and if anybody has any questions, fire away.
Okay, guys, thank you for that. Poonam, I have a question from Leslie here. She just said, did you and your assistant coach explain to the athletes that you were taking the silent coach approach and why you were doing it?
Yeah. So we did explain to them in a team meeting prior to making that decision. We sat them down. We told them exactly why. So fully transparent with the team of what we were doing and what we were trying to achieve. And so we wouldn't have done it if they weren't on board. Everybody was on board with it, and so we started off, in November, and it actually continued on all the way through to mid-February. Which was longer than what we were anticipating. But yeah, we were fully transparent with the team.
Awesome. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll give Amanda a second to get ready here and start the recording. Thank you, Katrina and Poonam. That was awesome. Taylor just asked, how did your team establish culture at the beginning of the season?
So what we do is during our preseason time, we typically do one of two things. We either go on a tour or we have a preseason retreat. And in that, we kind of bring in some of the historical pieces, but we also frame who we are as a program and what we value. But that's also something that they as a team are able to talk amongst one another and bring those pieces up. And so for myself, I've actually asked the athletes to shoot out phrases or shoot out words that they think is important that reflects our team identity. And then they are able to pick those words and that becomes a part of our core team culture. And it's great because some of the senior athletes have a really good understanding, and then the rookies come in and they're able to bring their understanding of what they want from the team, and then then they create something collectively. So that's what we've done.
Yeah, and there was actually, I think mid-season, we almost did a check-in of that, and I had them come up with some stuff that they thought were their strengths as a team, because at the beginning of the year, it was hard to tell. I think they weren't really sure yet, and so we had a conversation around that and had them write down some of those strengths that we brainstormed and posted it in their locker room for the rest of the season as well.
Cool. Christina just asked if you have any tips for helping young athletes become more comfortable with positive self-talk exercises.
Katrina, you got anything?
Let's see. I think sometimes allowing athletes to, usually any athlete, I start with just having some awareness of what self-talk you might be having, because our thoughts tend to be so automatic that you don't even realize whether they're positive or negative or neutral, and either prompting, like we did at one practice, of just reminding athletes or giving them an exercise to write down some of the thoughts they might have, to bring some of that awareness in, and then focusing from there on how you might challenge some of those thoughts or soften the edges to make them a little bit more positive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think you could even layer that in with young coaches as well.
Yeah.
I think it's quite overwhelming for someone who's just stepping on the floor, field, or weight room, whatever they happen to be doing, just as a new to a program especially, and there's a lot of self-doubt coming in. Marcello asked, how much autonomy do you allow athletes with team systems, as in terms of like offense and defense?
Yeah. So we're building towards that. So I think it's kind of like a give and take. There are times where, I want to give them full autonomy, because sometimes in our sport, the situation arises pretty quickly. And so athletes need to be able to make the decision on the fly without having the information come from the side. But I think it's about building them up to the point where they can understand what those situations look like. And so during training, they're not choosing, we're working through things. In the game, we'll start with specifics offensive and defensive plays or strategies. But if they decide to switch that around because they see something on the field, I support them fully. And so that's something that we've been building towards, and that's the dream, for a coach to stand on the side and just not say anything the whole time.
That is the dream. This will be the last question for now. We can always circle back, guys, if you have something for one of the previous speakers. Any tips on creating buy-in for a young teenage athlete into a new sport where everything is different? He coaches or she coaches wrestling for 13 to 14-year-olds, and it can be really overwhelming. Any tips on hooking them into the sport? And as someone who's coached wrestling, and I'm pretty sure I know who this person is, but it says user. I get it. It's such a weird sport for kids to get used to. So.
Yeah, I'll start, and then Katrina, you can add in. I think creating an environment where an individual feels accepted, regardless of the sport, is always going to get them to come back. And I think, I've talked to so many of my friends, and we always kind of went back to why we loved multi-sports, and we loved to go to this and that. And it was just because it was fun, and we enjoyed going back time and time. And so if the coach is great, if you can make friends, that's going to get them coming back in. The development and the intensity and sort of that passion and that drive for the sport is going to come, but it only comes if it's an enjoyable environment to be in the first place.
You know what? I think I might come back to this after Nicole and Amanda go, because Christina, who asked the question previous, is a water polo. And I think it's something to be said around, especially in sports where your uniform is quite revealing. And I'm not just talking for females here. I know it can be intimidating for boys and girls specifically to throw on, say, a singlet or a bathing suit. So I think we'll circle back to those questions from Christina and Mike. I'm going to leave it here, guys, and we're going to get Amanda starting. So Amanda Jones is one of my associates within strength and conditioning. She's done an unreal job with our athletes since starting on and moving up from graduate assistant into full-time staff member. And please give her your attention. Amanda, I'll give you about a 10-minute call just via message so you have an awareness of time. And if you can, Poonam, stop the recording now, we'll get Amanda to start.